Hello, tank commanders of the Imperial Guard and wannabe Knight Commander Pask. In this video, we are going to be going over another deep dive map study. We are going to go over the Hammer and Anvil deployments on GW terrain layouts 1, 7, and 8. But before we start looking at the maps, we are going to go through some basic concepts for deployment and playstyle, and we're going to go over our list very quickly. If you want a more detailed explanation, you can watch my other video. So we're going to go down this list, and the first thing you want to be looking at is where are the best firing lanes? Where can you put your tanks because you have fewer tanks because you're running a super heavy. So where do you want to put your tanks so that they can fire on the most areas of the map and get to objectives and other firing lanes in one turn? Next, where is the best hiding place for super heavy against an anti-tank list, particularly ranged anti-tank? So things like Tau with a lot of hammerheads and Sky Rays with those Strength 14 missiles. Knight Castellans that can just tow into a ruin and fire volcano cannon at you. Necron list with Doomsday Arcs. Tyranid list with a bunch of rupture cannons. So you want to make sure your super heavy doesn't get popped on turn one, especially when your whole army is surrounding it and you don't have a 4-up invul save from the engine seer. So you want to make sure that you're deploying it relatively safe. So even if they do have some ranged anti-tank units, they're not able to combine all their firepower and get their maximum buffs. Next, where does the enemy want to stage? You want to consider this so that you can outplay your opponent. Maybe they want to stage in a ruin that's really close to your ruin so they can just charge you out of the ruin and be in engagement. That way you can't overwatch them. You want to prevent that from happening. And you want to make sure you're not getting hit from through the wall. So next, can you get onto two objectives turn one with bait units with only move, 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 and disembark? This is because you want to score your maximum secondaries, and in order to do that, you can't action after you advanced. Since we're talking super heavies, we're going to be talking about the Hammer of the Emperor detachment, and in that detachment, you can auto advance 6 inches, and you have a stratagem that lets you advance and shoot, but if you advance and shoot, you can't action. So we want to make sure that we can get into locations of the map where we need to be with just move, 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 and disembarking. Next, how to move if you go turn one to force enemies into firing lanes. So you want to make sure that after you move, if the enemy either shoots at you or attacks you in melee, that you can counterattack with as many units as possible to destroy that enemy unit. So for ranged armies, if they can fire at you, you can fire back at them. For melee armies, when they do get into engagement, will they be in your other tank's firing lanes or are they going to be hidden from return fire? You want to make sure that they're not hidden from return fire. Like I said earlier, you're not getting fought through ruins. You're not getting charged from out of ruins because you can't really do anything then. Next, which tanks have the option to use crash through? And is there a way to deploy such that you don't have to use crash through? So the reason we're playing Hammer of the Emperor is that it is a very mobile detachment and super heavies are large, difficult to move, but the crash through stratagem lets you move any Astra Militarum vehicle through the wall, whether it's a Chimera, a Scout Sentinel, or a Baneblade. So it is nice to have, but it isn't good to spam it. So if you can deploy in such a way that you don't have to spend CP on your movement stratagems, then that's even better because you can save CP to use smoke or overwatch or adding AP to one of your tanks. Next, which tank should use advance and shoot and which should use move, move, move so you can best stack and combine firepower? Sometimes one vehicle is not going to do it. You need to have the Hellhound stripping cover. You need to have your Leman Russ Exterminator adding AP, and then you get to fire with your Rogel Dorn or your Baneblade. So you want to make sure that you have multiple units because synergy is what makes the Imperial Guard good. And if you bring a lot of synergy in good units, but you deploy in such a way that they're not really supporting each other, then you've defeated the purpose of playing guard and you should play a different army that's more data sheet oriented and not synergy oriented. So you want to make sure that multiple tanks, especially your support tanks like your Hellhound and your Lehman Russ Exterminator, and of course your Scout Sentinels, but they're plenty fast by themselves. So you got to make sure that multiple of those units can get line of sight on enemies wherever they are. That way, when your Baneblade fires, it can have bonus AP, or when your Rogel fires, then the enemy has cover stripped, so that you're not losing any of that valuable AP you have because the Baneblade and the Rogel Dorn, their main gun has AP -2. So if you're firing against a 2-up save and they're in cover, your AP2 essentially puts them on a 3-up save, and that's not very reliable. You want to make sure that you are getting that bonus AP, so you're going to AP -3, stripping their cover. Now they're on a 5-up save instead of a 3-up save. So instead of having 1/3 of your shots on average going through, now you have 2/3 of your shots going through. And when you have synergy like that, your damage can double. So next, we're going to go through our list quickly. We call this the Speed Striker list because it is a very fast list. It is a very aggressive list, and it's made so that you're using scouts and sentinels to smash the enemy and also set up screening lines for your heavy tanks to follow up, sit on objectives, and just shoot the enemy off of objectives and prevent them from getting onto objectives. So we're going to bring the Baneblade because we're talking super heavies here. And if you're bringing a Baneblade, you got to bring the mandatory Lord Solar Command Blob, which is Lord Solar Leontus, who's 130 points, the Cadian Command Squad, which is 65 points for 5 people, and 10-man Cadian Shock Troops, which is 65 points. And why you bring the Command Blob is because the Cadian Command Squad has a master box, and that allows Lord Solar to transmit his orders from the normal 6 inches to now 24 inches, and that's more than enough if he's located somewhere in the middle of the map. And by the middle of the map, I mean the middle of your deployment zone, right? You don't want him on one corner and your Baneblade on the other corner. The reason you're taking Lord Solar is because currently he can order Titanic units, and he is the only unit in the entire Astra Militarum datasheet pool that can order a super heavy. Next, this is also mandatory. You bring Tech Priest Engine Seers. I bring 2 in my list because one of them is going to support the Baneblade late game, and the other one is going to support the Rogaldorn Tank Commander late game. And this is a Hammer of the Emperor list, so the Rogaldorn Tank Commander is really good because you can put enhancements on him. And I put the Indomitable Steed enhancement that gives it a 6-up Feel No Pain. So combine that with a 4-up Invulnerable Save from the Tech Priest Engine Seer. And you can also use Smoke on him. Rogaldorn Tank Commander is great. He also gives you 2 Squadron Orders. The Baneblade takes 1 Titanic order from Lord Solar, and Lord Solar has 2 other orders he can give, and the Cadian Command Squad has 1 regiment order you can give. So your Rogel gives you 2, Lord Solar gives you 2 after the Baneblade, and then your Cadian Command Squad gives you a regiment order that you can use on your mortar team, which we'll get to. Next, we have a Hellhound that strips cover. That's why it's there. Next, we have Lehman Russ Exterminator that adds bonus AP. That's why that's there. And then we have a Chimera. The Chimera starts with Catachan mortars inside. And you might be wondering, why would you put indirect fire inside of a Chimera? Well, Catachan mortars have a 6-inch scout move. So they can make the Chimera move 6 inches for free in the beginning of the game. And when your turn comes around, your movement phase, your mortars can disembark, gaining extra movement because you can disembark wholly within 3 inches of your transport. And then once the mortars get out, Ogrins that are nearby walk into the Chimera and embark. Then the Chimera moves, and the Ogrins fire their Ripper guns out of the firing deck. Ogrin Ripper guns get rapid fire that doubles their shot volume when you are within 9 inches of the enemy. So you want to be close up. You want to be in the enemy's face, and that's what the Chimera allows you to do. It gives you a lot of extra movement to the Ogrins. Next, you have Taurox and Kazarkin. This is also a speed combo. Taurox can auto advance 6 inches in the detachment, already goes 12 inches, base move, and it can advance and disembark. Kazarkin, kind of like the Catachan Mortars, have scout 6 inches, so you get 6-inch free move on your Taurox. And the Kazarkin, after they disembark, they have very close range weaponry. Their Melta mine is 3-inch range. Their Meltaguns, if you take Meltaguns, most people take two. They are also close range. You have to be within 6 inches to get the bonus damage from the Melta. So the Taurox is a perfect delivery package for the Kazarkin. And like the Catachans, they are really fast. Next, we have two Scout Sentinels, which are auto-include in the list. They help the Baneblade be more reliable in hitting, and they also help all of your other tanks except Flamers because Flamers already auto-hit. So they're really good for supporting nearly your entire army. And they have Scouts 9, which adds a lot more speed to your army, and they have the regiment and squadron keywords. So one cool trick you can do is use a Rogaldorn tank commander or Lord Solar and use one of the orders to order the Scout Sentinel to move, move, move. It can auto advance 6 inches because it's a squadron unit, and you don't necessarily have to be eligible to shoot to use the data sheet ability to mark a target so that your whole army gets to reroll hit rolls of 1 against it. So Scout Sentinels are really fast. They're cheap at 55 points. They're great trade units. And they also buff your entire army. So I think in any list, not just in super heavy lists, not just in Hammer of the Emperor list, but any list in any detachment, having at least one Scout Sentinel is a really good idea. Next, we have Gaunt's Ghosts. And they don't necessarily do anything in this particular detachment other than being a really good secondary scoring unit. They can uppy downy, which means that the end of the opponent's fight phase, if you are not engaged, you can pull the Gaunt's Ghost off the board, and the next turn you can set it up on the board. And when you do that, Gaunt's Ghost is an officer that has two orders. It can order itself and it can order regiment units. So let's say your Kazarkin disembarked out of your Taurox. You can order the Kazarkin to take aim with Gaunt's Ghost. Kazarkin's datasheet ability says that it can order itself at the start of any phase on top of an order it has already received. So that way the Kazarkin can get take aim and first rank fire, second rank fire, which gives extra shots to your hot shot last guns, and it gives extra shots to your plasma guns. So you can increase the Kazarkin's firepower by using Gaunt's Ghost to give it an extra order. And a lot of the times your Taurox and your Kazarkin are going to move out of range of Lord Solar's order. 24 inches is good for ordering tanks, but the Taurox is so ridiculously fast, and the Kazarkin can disembark even further. So if they do survive until Gaunt's Ghost goes up and comes down again, you can give it extra orders. So Gaunt's Ghost is nice for that. You can also order swap Sentinels if you want. It's really not there just to do that. But Gaunt's Ghosts have infiltrate too. So if the enemy has infiltrators or scouts that you're trying to block, well, not scouts, you could block scouts, but if the enemy has an infiltrator that wants to take the midboard, then you can just line up Gaunt's Ghosts, prevent the enemy from infiltrating, and at the end of your deployment, you can use Lord Solar Leontis's datasheet ability to redeploy up to 3 Astra Militarum units. And so you can just pick up Gaunt's Ghost and then put them in a safe spot, or you could put them on the opponent's natural expansion objective or right behind it in cover. Well, by cover, I mean behind a ruin so they can't be shot at. And you can apply a lot of pressure with Gaunt's Ghost. You can use them as infiltrators, you can use them to score location secondaries like late game behind enemy lines or late game establish locus in the enemy's deployment zone or a big sabotage for 6 points in the enemy's deployment zone. So you could use them late game as scoring unit. You can infiltrate block with them. You can hunt enemy lone op characters, and you can also order swap or give bonus orders. So Gaunt's Ghost is really good in any detachment, but I bring him in Hammer of the Emperor because I really like the uppy downy scoring capability, and I do like that it can order itself as well as give an extra order if needed. So that's the list, and we're going to move over to the map studies now. First one is GW Terrain Layout 1, and this is a very safe deployment, but in one turn, you can go from safe to maximum pressure, and that's exactly what you want in a perfect deployment. So we're going to go big stuff first. We're going to talk about the Baneblade. We park it backwards here. The reason you park it backwards is when you move it into this ruin, you can just flip the turret around and stick out the barrel outside that ruin and get line of sight. From here, sticking out the barrel this way, you can get line of sight up here into that kill zone. So the pink areas with the light blue X's are kill zones, or dead zones, as I call it in some of my videos, which is if the opponent goes there, they're going to die. So they can't stop in any of these pink zones or else they will die. And you could tell that quite a lot of the board in and in front of their deployment zone are all kill zones. So you could fire up top, you could fire all the way through the middle into their deployment zone next to their home objective. And since you can draw line of sight anywhere from the tank, you can even use part of the track to draw line of sight down here to the bottom. So this is a really offensive place for the Baneblade to be. And this is not all of the line of sights that you can get, because you can flip the turret around, move the tank over a little bit, and you can stick your barrel out towards the bottom of the ruin. And then you have a different place that you can get angles from. So if you put the barrel out this way, then you can get a line of sight over the middle objective and get better angles to the bottom here. So from this position, the Baneblade is able to cover 3 different objectives. And it will not fit in the middle, but in one move with Crash Through Stratagem, after coming here, you can get onto the top objective and put a OC on that. So this is a great place to be. And you don't need any other orders to make it move. And so you can put take aim on it turn 1, which is exactly what you want to do, is to put take aim if you have something to shoot at, so you're more reliable. A Rogaldorn starts down at the bottom. And if you use advance and shoot stratagem, then you can fire all the way into the bottom of their deployment zone, as well as quite a ways up here. You can see that if the Baneblade goes here, you actually get crossfire. And the Baneblade can fire on a target here as well as the Rogaldorn. So that's very powerful. Remember what I said about stacking? This is part of what stacking is. You build in redundancy into your movement. That way you have multiple tanks. So if you whiff, meaning you have really bad rolls on one of your tanks and you don't destroy the enemy, then you have another tank that can follow up, especially if it's an important enemy that really needs to disappear. So from this deployment, the Baneblade is really safe. Even this narrow line of sight that the opponent has up top, if you deploy properly, you will be out of that line of sight. You'll be out of that firing lane. I mean, but you will always be in this bottom firing lane. And if you do get shot on turn one, that's fine because your Rogel Dorn can counterattack. And you want to make the Rogel Dorn as effective as possible. And that's why we deploy our Hellhound towards the middle. The Hellhound with move, move, move can actually touch the objective. So if it doesn't need to strip cover, if it doesn't need to do damage, it just move, 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 get onto that center objective. And from there, the Hellhound can score some of the action secondaries. You can score a cleanse, you can score area denial, you know? So you could score quite a lot of secondaries with the Hellhound being positioned here. And it also serves as a bottom screen. So if enemies want to stage in this ruin and they want to attack the Baneblade by coming out and then charging the Baneblade, the Hellhound is here blocking it with its hull. So the Hellhound serves a lot of different purposes. And you can see from this position that the Hellhound does have an angle onto the bottom. So where the enemy would need to be to hit your Baneblade, the Hellhound is in that firing lane. So the Hellhound can strip cover if needed from where it is in the middle. On top of that, the Leman Russ Exterminator, right below it, can use Crash Through with a normal move, get the hull fully through that ruin, and it looks like part of the barrel is overlapping with the ruin wall, but it's not because this is a Leman Russ Exterminator that has shorter barrels, not by much, but slightly shorter, and you can turn the turret sideways so that if you need to go through the ruin, you can just make it right through the ruin without the barrel interfering with the ruin wall. So you can use crash through, and from here it also has line of sight. So you can strip cover, add AP, and then use the Rogel Dorn to advance and shoot. And since the Rogel Dorn doesn't need move, 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 since you're using a stratagem to give it the movement it needs, you can put take aim. It can order itself, right? Because it's a tank commander. So the Rogel Dorn, now he's hitting on a 3, and the enemy has cover stripped, and you have bonus AP. So your main oppressor gun now has a full AP -3, which is good against most targets. So this is a great way to deploy. That way, even if your Baneblade gets hit early, you have enough units to have a full strength counterattack at the bottom here. We put the Taurox right in front of the Rogel Dorn, and the reason why is because even with the Taurox here, the Rogel Dorn has plenty of movement to stick the barrel out of that blue ruin here and fire on the enemy. The Taurox has a scout move, so you scout out 6 inches, and without using crash through, you can actually go all the way around this blue part of the ruin and end up here. Now, usually the enemies, they're gonna have scouts, they're gonna have screening, but you don't have to be here. You could be outside the blue ruin, disembark some guys inside and fire. You can go around the blue ruin if you have space, and you can disembark and fire on the enemy. So this Taurox, it's going to scout, move, 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 advance, disembark, and you can clear out guys from behind the ruin where they want to stage. So you already have a Hellhound in the middle, so that if the enemy comes out, they either have to charge the Hellhound, or if they're on their way to charging the Baneblade, then the Hellhound can overwatch them. So the Hellhound is a screening piece right here, but your Taurox is also attacking whatever's staging in that ruin. So the great thing about Hammer of the Emperor, especially a speed list, is that a lot of different armies that focus on using melee, they like to use one turn to stage and then they attack you. So whether you go first or second, when the enemy stages, you hit them on their staging turn. That's your go turn. Well, half of your go turn, because your transports and your Hellhound, they're having their go turn, and you're keeping your Rogel Dorn and your Baneblade safe because they have a lot more damage output, they have a lot more OC, they're worth a lot more points. And so you keep them back. and then maybe on turn 2 or 3 or 4, then they go out, sit on objectives, and really play the scoring game. But in the beginning, you keep them back so that when the enemy comes out to attack your cheap units that are below 100 points, your trade units, then you can counterattack with your Baneblade and your Rogel Dorn. And that's why it's so important to deploy so that you can get to places that you have line of sight on most of the map in one turn. So this is the Baneblade and the bottom here, which is used to counterattack opponents that will fire on the Baneblade. And if you look right here, you can get the Leman Russ and the Rogel Dorn both on the objective. So the Leman Russ has 3 OC, I believe, and the Rogel Dorn has 5. So you have 8 OC on that bottom objective, which is pretty decent. You can get out OC'd, meaning the opponent just brings in a bunch of infantry and just crowds the objective, but the Hellhound is a good Overwatch piece, and the Rogel Dorn is also a pretty decent Overwatch piece. And so you do have some options to counter that if the enemy tries to out OC you. So up here, we have our Chimera. It scouts out 6 inches, and when your turn comes around, it drops off the Catachan mortars up here. Why we want the mortars up here is because we're screening the enemy from getting to that Baneblade. So we drop off the mortars, we move the Chimera out. The Chimera now has Ogryns in it because the Ogryns, they walk into the Chimera. And so the Chimera doesn't have to get move, move, move. It doesn't have to advance and shoot. You're saving advance and shoot in case your Rogel Dorn has to use it. And if it doesn't have to use it, good for you, because now you have extra CP for Overwatch or for using smoke. So with a scout and a regular move, the Chimera can get this far in front of the Baneblade, and it's using its hull to protect the Baneblade. So what the enemy has to do is they're going to have to charge the Chimera, or they're going to have to go all the way around it, leading to a longer charge distance. So right here from the end of their deployment zone, it's a 16-inch distance to get to that Baneblade. So do note that engagement range is 1 inch. So they only need to get above 15, I believe. I'm not sure if that's exactly 16 or a little bit over or under, but let's just say they need 15 inches of move. Normal things move 6 to 8 inches. So they're going to need a 7-inch charge. Then it's going to be very awkward to place all their models if they have a multi-model unit, then they're going to have to place them because they can't end up on top of a ruin. So it's kind of awkward for them to get into contact with the Baneblade through here. Now, I'm not saying they can't, but it makes it harder. Now, there are things that have 12-inch move, like jump packs and flying demons. So the way we placed it awkwardly on this ruin, you can't really fit the base of a knight or a demon, something that has the speed to get into contact. The Chimera, you place it so that they can't fit their base between the Chimera and the ruin wall. You don't have enough space between the ruin wall and the Baneblade to fit a big base there. Between the Baneblade and the Hellhound, there is another ruin wall. So they can't land anywhere. So the only things that can actually reasonably threaten you are jump pack intercessor style units. And when they do come out to attack you, you can overwatch them. You have a Chimera and you have a Hellhound. And if you bring Inferno and Heavy Flamers on the Hellhound and double Heavy Flamer on the Chimera, you have a reasonable amount of volume fire to take out a few of the jump pack intercessors, and they are unlikely to destroy your Baneblade in one phase. And if that's the case, you can always use your Tech Priest Engine Seer to repair that Baneblade. So let's talk about the engine seers. We have one at the bottom here to support the Rogel Dorn. It doesn't necessarily have to put the 4-up invul on that Rogel Dorn. It can put a 4-up invul save on the Taurox. The Taurox can come out, and instead of going all the way through here, if it doesn't have to, it can stop in front of the ruin and serve as a screening unit with a 4-up invul save, which really helps the transports a lot because the transports only have a 3-up base save instead of a 2-up base save. So you can do that and then maybe push the Rogel Dorn out very slightly so it can fire on the top of the map. So let's say there are no enemies. They decided that this is a very dangerous place to put their units, and they decided to focus more on deploying safely inside of this area where it's protected by 2 ruins. So we have a lot of enemies stage here. There's not a lot here. Maybe you move the Taurox out and then you move your Rogel Dorn out and you put a 4-up invul on that Taurox instead of your Rogel Dorn. But if there are a lot of enemies and your Rogel Dorn is being aggressive, then you could put a 4-up invul on that Rogel Dorn, then follow it out with the Engine Seer so that you could repair if you need to next turn. And same concept up here. If the Baneblade has enough to shoot being hidden back here and it doesn't necessarily have to come out aggressively, then you could put a 4-up invul save on the Chimera, send the Chimera out, right? So now your screen has a 4-up invul save and the Chimera is a lot more durable because like the Taurox, it only has a 3-up base save. And then next turn, the Engine Seer is close enough so that if the Baneblade does take damage, it can repair the Baneblade and put a 4-up invul on that. Now, if your Baneblade has to be aggressive, let's say the enemy scouts out very aggressively, they have a lot of stuff exposed, then your Baneblade can come out. It has a lot of things to shoot at. There's a reason for exposing itself. And then in that case, you might want to put a 4-up invul on that Baneblade because you might actually take a lot of damage and take a lot of fire next turn when the enemy decides to counterattack. So there are a lot of choices here, but this is a very aggressive deployment. And one of the things that I talk about in other videos, and it's a very strong opinion of mine, is that the Baneblade is one of the best super heavies you can bring because it has a long barrel and a rotating turret. The Hellhammer has a rotating turret too, but the damage output is not so good against heavier targets, and the barrel is a lot shorter, so it's a lot harder to play. The Bane Sword has a long barrel that extends past its hull. The Shadow Sword, even though it's very swingy, has a barrel that extends past the hull. So you can actually do this ruin trick with a few other super heavy variants. But if you have a Doomhammer, a Storm Sword, or a Bane Hammer, or a Storm Lord, then you can't do this because you don't have a piece of barrel to stick out because they have short stubby barrels and no turret. So if you're playing those variants, it's going to be a lot harder. You definitely not going to want to deploy here. You might want to deploy somewhere else or move it somewhere else so that you can get lines of sight. And the reason why is because you can fire out of a ruin only if you're wholly within the ruin or a piece of your hull or a barrel or a piece of your model sticks out past the ruin. So you either have to stick something out or be wholly within the ruin. A super heavy, look how big it is. It cannot fit in a blue ruin. It cannot fit in a gray ruin. It cannot fit in any ruins. So the only way to get line of sight outside of a ruin is to be outside that ruin or stick a piece of barrel out of that ruin. And the only variants that can actually do that are the Baneblade, maybe the Hellhammer, the Shadow Sword, and the Bane Sword. No other variant can do that. And the only variant that has a turret and a long barrel is the Baneblade. So this is why I think that datasheets aside, gameplay wise, the Baneblade is amazing because you can actually deploy it and play it a lot more effectively than other data sheets that may look like they're better. Like the Storm Sword, for example, has a really good data sheet ability. It has high damage, but you can't play it like you can play the Baneblade. So this is the reason this map in particular, Hammer and Anvil on GW Terrain Layout 1, in particular is one map where the Baneblade driving backwards with a rotating turret shines. I think that in this deployment and this map in particular, the Baneblade absolutely is much better than any other variant. So next we're going to talk about a different GW map, Terrain Layout 7. It's a lot different. But again, we're putting the Baneblade backwards. So what you do is you spin the turret around and then you drive it into that ruin. Stick the turret out of the ruin. See that little blue ruin right here? That means it's either a terrain feature or usually in the game stores I go to, they're 2-inch ruins. So it can stick its barrel out, and then now you have line of sight to the front, the top objective, all of the middle objective, and the back of the bottom objective. So here the Baneblade shines again because of the things it can do. And we have our Rogel Dorn up top. We have a Chimera next to it. And then down here, we have a Lehman Russ Exterminator and the Taurox. We have Scout Sentinels here, and they just scout out, do their thing. And we have a Hellhound here. So in this map, the enemy staging areas are so close to your ruins. This is very deadly if you screw up. You don't want to screw up. You have to be very decisive. You have to be very precise in this map. And so you have to hit them first. So you have to deploy in such a way that you can flush enemies out of their staging areas. And you also have to be aware of screening your Baneblade and even your Rogel Dorn, because your Rogel Dorn is like a fake super heavy. Its durability is really high and it has crazy volume fire. It essentially has the same gun that the Baneblade has, except you have 66%. You have 2/3 the shot the Baneblade has, but it's the same weapon profile. You have the coaxial autocannon, you have the heavy stubber, and you have your sponson weapons, which are your meltas and your multi-meltas typically, and you also have your extra melta guns or your extra stubbers. I prefer the extra stubbers, as well as your pulverizer, which is an option you can take over the Gatling. So the Rogel Dorn has a blistering volume of fire, and you don't want it to go down, so you want to make sure that you're screening the Rogel Dorn as well as screening your Baneblade. So we're going to play this map exactly the same way we played the previous map. The Chimera scouts out 6 inches, but look, if the enemy has a ranged, like a gun unit here, it can shoot the Chimera out. But you have a scout move because you're putting the Catachan mortars inside the Chimera. So you scout forward 3 inches and then you go diagonally so that you're behind the ruin and they can't shoot you through that ruin. Well, other than with indirect fire, which most armies don't have. So unless the enemy goes first, they have scouts or really fast movement and they're coming all the way out here to get line of sight, which is it's good for you because then you can just keep the Rogel Dorn where it is and just fire on the enemy. So unless they're being very aggressive, your Chimera is pretty safe here. And when your turn comes around, you drop the mortars off and you can tow the objective with 2 of your mortars. Then you can crash through the wall for 1 CP, advance and shoot for another CP. So this is kind of expensive. You are using 2 CP on a freaking Chimera. But it's worth it because you have Ogrins that are going to hop into the Chimera and you can get this far. You could be well in front of that objective. So your Chimera again serves as a screen with its hull, and this is 9 inches. The Ogrins from the firing deck get rapid fire against enemies inside this ruin. Now, if they're staging behind the ruin and not inside the ruin, then it's better for you. You have way better angles. So your Chimera can knock a lot of chaff off and be a distraction Carnifex. So the enemy's distracted by the Chimera. Maybe it wastes a turn or two attacking it, you know? Or it can go straight for the objective and try to out OC you and deny you, which is fine because your Chimera can overwatch them if they do that. So either way, you are defending this objective, and this is kind of how you play Bullgrin, you go past the objective. But instead of using Bullgrin to go past the objective and protect whatever's holding your objective, we're going to use transports. And again, here we have our Tech Priest Engine Seer that's ready to support the Rogel Dorn. But on the first turn, if you're going to play aggressively, look, after the Chimera makes a scout move, the Tech Priest Engine Seer is in range in the command phase to give a 4-up invul to that Chimera. So when it does go out, if the enemy is distracted by it, well, now you are firing and melee attacking it with a 4-up invul save. So it makes the Chimera a lot more durable. And so we have our Rogel Dorn. It can come out. This is with move, move, move. It can get over here. And it has really good firing lanes all the way down here into the enemy's deployment zone. And from here, if anything touches that middle objective, you could overwatch it. So if they come out of the ruin, you're overwatching them, right? So this is a great place for the Rogaldorn to be. And next turn, let's say there's a bunch of enemies crowded around that Chimera to destroy it. Your Rogaldorn can peek out and fire back at them. Or if they're positioned in such a way that your Rogaldorn cannot fire at them, then it can just use crash through and get better angles against the enemy. So this is an okay place to place a Rogaldorn. Now, there's a circle here which represents the Scout Sentinel, but don't worry, that's where it goes with the Scout move. When your movement phase comes around, that Scout Sentinel is going to be long gone before your Rogel gets there. So there's no problem with that. Now we have our Hellhound. The Hellhound makes a 10-inch move, which will put it right here with move, move, move. It can end up right here. And this is a great place to be to overwatch and to screen both your Rogel Dorn and your Baneblade. Now, the issue here is from this ruin wall, it appears that it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6-inch charge. If the enemy can reroll their charge rolls, then a 6-inch charge is actually pretty reliable. So you may want to keep your Chimera back and put the back up against your ruin wall and make them have to get a 8-inch charge, which is not as reliable as a 6-inch charge. So your Hellhound can be a little further back and still be touching that objective to score actions if you need to on the first turn. But you can see with just move, move, move that you can perform center of the battlefield actions. Up here you have the mortar team that can fire indirectly, or you can just use them to perform an action like cleanse up there. Now down here, you have your Lehman Russ Exterminator, and that thing can just move out here. And with move, 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 it can touch that objective. So if you need to score something on a bottom objective, it can also do that. So you have an ability to get onto all 3 objectives on your first turn if you need to. And from this angle, the Lehman Russ Exterminator can fire all the way up to the top and use its Withering Hail ability to give bonus AP to whatever else in your army fires at the same target. You see, from the central position, the Hellhound can strip cover on the top ruin and on the bottom ruin, as well as into their deployment zone. So the Hellhound is placed in a very good place to support the rest of your army, and it is also a cheap and durable hull. So if you want to add more durability, here's your second Tech Priest Engine Seer. It's deployed close to the Baneblade. So if your Baneblade manages to take damage, which in this deployment you probably won't, you're nearly perfectly safe. The only thing that could hit this Baneblade in this position is possibly a knight that tows onto the top of the ruin, fires over the ruin wall, and fires on the Baneblade. And there's really space for just one knight to do that. So your Baneblade is extremely safe in this deployment. So most likely, you can just put a 4-up invul save on that Hellhound and send it out as well. So now you have a Chimera in their face with a 4-up invul. You have a Hellhound in their face with a 4-up invul. Next turn comes around, now your Rogel Dorn has a 4-up invul, and your Baneblade has a 4-up invul. So you see how your tech priests are supporting multiple tanks. You're not just wasting 45 points to babysit a tank that may or may not get shot. You're buffing tanks that you're sending out into the enemy's face. You know that they're going to get attacked. So you give the 4-up invul buff on those vehicles. And you send them out aggressively, and the engine seers stay back. So when they blow up, well, if they blow up, your engine seers don't die from deadly demise. So they're alive next turn to support your big units, you see? And, turn two onwards, now you're babysitting the big units. So that's how I use engine seers. Most people don't bring more than one. But in my playstyle, I bring two engine seers because my list, you only have one super heavy, but it's as if you have two super heavies. And I have other vehicles. It's very vehicle heavy. And if you want to give your lead vehicles, what I call them, the ones that go out and bait and sit there for overwatch and flush enemies out of wherever they want to stage, distract the enemy, use your hulls to move block. These guys are getting buffs on the first turn. And then on the next turn, your big guys are getting buffs when they come out to counterattack, right? So that's how I use my engine seers. And the Lehman Russ from here, it's in a reasonable place. It's kind of vulnerable if the enemy deploys close to the front of their deployment and then goes around the bottom ruin and attacks it. But it's a 180 points unit, and it's not the end of the world if you lose it. If the enemy does go here to fight that Lehman Russ, do notice that your Baneblade can counterattack. Your Lehman Russ is so far from that ruin wall, it can't get fought from through the ruin wall, so they have to come out. Maybe you don't get to overwatch them, but after they're done attacking it, next turn you have a fall back and shoot stratagem if you're alive. If you're dead, then they can consolidate onto the objective, and the Baneblade can fire them off the objective. So it's okay where the Lehman Russ is. Same thing goes with that Hellhound. If that Hellhound goes down, either from shooting or from melee, you have a Rogel Dorn, you got a Baneblade, you have your Exterminator, you have your whole army, even your Chimera. If it's a little further back, maybe, you have really good angles so that if anything destroys that Hellhound, then you can counterattack. Now, this Chimera, if the enemy fights it through the wall, then you're kind of out of luck. But do note that we have one last unit we're going to talk about, which is the Taurox. We have the Kazarkin and the Taurox. It makes a 6-inch scout move, normal move, advance, and move, move, move. It can come out all the way over here. You can put it a little bit further down, disembark guys to hit the guys staging inside that ruin, or you can put it a little bit further up so that you can disembark guys and have more firepower into whatever staging in that ruin. So you have the Chimera with the Ogrins, and you have Taurox and Kazarkin able to fire on guys hiding behind the ruins and distract the enemy as well as try to destroy them or flush them out, right? What I mean by flush them out is look where the Taurox is. It's in your firing lane. So if anything comes out to fight the Taurox, well, you could fire back at them next turn. See how we stack the tanks? We have one firing lane. We have a Hellhound in front of the Rogel Dorn, stripping cover for the Rogel Dorn and screening the Rogel Dorn from melee attacks. You see, this is tank stacking. And you see this firing lane, we have the Baneblade, the Hellhound, and the Chimera. We're stacking tanks in the firing lane. We have a Hellhound and an Exterminator stacked here. So the amount of synergy and combos you can do can get really crazy. From this position, using Crash Through, the Baneblade can make it and nearly cover the entire middle objective. So turns 3, 4, 5, the Baneblade can get onto an objective, score secondaries once the enemy is thoroughly destroyed. So this is the GW Terrain Layout 7 play style, and it's very similar to the play style of GW Terrain Layout 1. Very similar concepts and what you're trying to do here. Now, one last note for this is moving order is important. Down here, you want to make sure you move your Sentinel. Why? Because it has a 9-inch scout move. So you move your Sentinel out first, then you move your Torox. Then when your movement phase comes up, you move your Sentinel out of the way, you move your Koroks out of the way. That way you have space for your Leman Russ to come out. So do note that when you are planning out maps like this, figure out your moving order. Maybe on the map, things kind of look crazy. It looks like things overlap sometimes, but they actually don't. Because if you move them in the correct order, then your things are going to be out of the way. Like your scouts are going to be out of the way so that your other tanks can kind of move up to where they were. So this is a very strong defensive position here. And you see how when you place a super heavy inside of a ruin like this, depending how you place it, it can prevent enemies with large bases from attacking the super heavy, especially if you have the front screened out, which in this map, we don't really have the front screened out very well, but we do have a Hellhound here, which you can move a little bit back and down, right? You can move the Hellhound a little bit that way, right? For better screening. And we also have this Torox here. The Torox can end up here, here, here. So the Torox and wherever the Khazar can disembark, that kind of serves as another screen. And you have Overwatch capability too. So yes, something can just kind of fly into the middle and attack the Baneblade, but you do have some reasonable ability to screen in Overwatch, so it's not the end of the world. Now, do note that if you don't have things to shoot at, you may want to advance with your Lehman Russ and maybe get it a little bit closer. That way, the bases can't land. You might want to keep your Torox back a little bit if it doesn't have to be that far up. And that way, it kind of restricts the area that the enemy can land and makes it a lot more difficult. And see the Scout Sentinel that scouted out 9? Next turn, you can move it up here. So see this void where the enemy can land to start attacking you if they have fly or something. Now the Scout Sentinel is here. Now it's very well screened from flying units even. So demons are the bane of my existence. I hate demons because they are so powerful in melee and you don't want to get touched by a demon. But if you have a bunch of cheap vehicles, sentinels, transports, things like that, screening your Baneblade, then your Baneblade is not likely to get hit even from flying enemies from the front, right? Even from knights that can walk over units, you're pretty safe because you're blocking where they're going to land, right? Against standard issue infantry, just being there means they have to go around because they don't have fly. So they just have to go around you or they have to fight and then consolidate into you. So this is actually a very strong defensive position. And here in the back, you can see that Lord Solar and his command blob are screening out almost the entirety of the back line. The reason why it's not fully screened out is on turn 1, you want to put your Cadian Guardsman on that objective next to the Baneblade. So you sticky it, and then you kind of just shuffle everything over, and you can get a guy to screen out the entire back line from even 6-inch deep strikes. You do have enough models and enough screening capability to do that. And so your back's protected, your front's protected, and maybe they could deep strike here, maybe, and attack your Baneblade if it's not screened out properly, but that's not the biggest deal because you do have units that can Overwatch. And if they do not rapid ingress, if they do rapid ingress, you're gonna use your Baneblade to shoot whatever drops in here. If they come out of reserves, then it's a pretty long charge distance. So, you know, it's pretty safe here. On the top side, it's really well defended. So your Baneblade is extremely well defended. Your Rogel Dorn is screened out by these mortars and it has a Hellhound in front of it. The Chimera's really far out. So something could possibly deep strike back here. It's not the biggest deal. You do have fall back and shoot stratagem, and you can overwatch with the Rogel Dorn. So even if things do deep strike, that's okay. They're deep striking in areas you don't really mind. Let's say they deep strike here, they fail to charge. Next turn, the Baneblade shoots them off the board. Easy, right? So anyway, we're gonna move on to the last terrain layout, which is GW terrain layout 8. Very similar to 7. A lot of straight ruins, a lot of ruins close to each other, right? This map has horrible, horrible lines of sight. So on this one, you're not going to play as aggressively. You're going to be focusing on baiting, screening, and counterattacking. So Chimera, he's up top, does exactly the same thing. Scouts forward, drops off mortars, crashes through the ruin, and this time a regular move can get you through that ruin with the Chimera. And so, can it? Let me see. Yep. So regular move gets you through there after the scout move. And so you just drop off a bunch of mortars, have them putting OC on the objective. You crash your Chimera through, and the Chimera is hull blocking again. The enemy wants to stage here. So instead of taking aim, maybe you can get move them an extra 3 inches, and then fire on the enemies that are staging behind here. But you probably don't have to. And the reason why is because your Rogel Dorn starts down here with move. It can touch that objective, putting 5 OC on it. And you can somewhat fire into the enemy's deployment zone. So if they don't have scouts and they haven't scouted out already, you can fire on them in their deployment zone. So you do have reasonable angles from here. The enemy will want to stage behind here in this ruin. So that's a problem for the Rogel Dorn because it can just get charged through the wall. So we have our Taurox that does exactly the same thing as in the other maps. It moves out 6 inches with the scout move, and then it makes a normal move, advance, because you can disembark after that. It takes move, and you can end up here, you can end up here, anywhere between here, and you can hit whatever's staging behind there. And the cool thing about Kazarkin is that they have a mine. So if it's a vehicle staging behind there, you can have a mine and throw some grenades at it, right? Because in this deployment, if you can see, you might use crash through on that Chimera. The Rogel Dorn doesn't have to advance and shoot. The Taurox doesn't advance and shoot. The Baneblade just shifts over. The Hellhound doesn't have to advance and shoot. Why? Because you don't want to have it advancing and shooting. You want to have it using move so that you can score whatever you want in the midboard here. Now, you can advance and shoot if you want, but if there's a need to, but you have an extra CP left. Consider it that way. In this deployment, we're not using both of the CP that Lord Solar generates. And so you can drop guys off here and you have an extra CP to use grenades. So you have Meltamine, grenades, your Meltaguns, your plasma guns. You have all kinds of goodies to flush the enemy out back here. Now, if the Torok goes up a little bit, it can drop off Kazarkin here. And now you got Rogel Dorn firing into this area. You have a Chimera that can fire into this area. And then you got a bunch of Kazarkin that can fire into that area. So the enemy is reasonably dead, unless it's something gigantic like a knight staging there. And if it's a knight staging there, that's fine, Let's say you don't advance with that Chimera. You can ram it and use tank shock too, if you want to. So instead of using grenades, you could use tank shock with instead. Now, grenades do an average of 3 mortal wounds. Tank shock, pretty much you're rolling d6 equal to your toughness. So on a Chimera, it's toughness 9. And on a 5 up, you're doing a 1 mortal. So a Chimera's toughness 9 tank shock and grenades are exactly the same average mortals. So you can also charge with the Chimera. And if they're not playing a detachment where they can fall back, shoot, and charge, then their knight is just stuck in combat. And that's too bad. Now you're stuck in combat with a Chimera. And that's good because I'm tying up a big knight and I'm preventing that knight from being relevant. Now it's going to have to fall back, or it's going to have to use big guns never tire to fire in combat, and it's all bad. right? And you have a 4-up invul save. So let's say they have a Reaper Chainsword, right? That has -4 AP, and you tank shock them. You crack you how do you say you make the charge and then you tank shock them, and now you're locked into combat. So you attack with your armored tracks, which aren't going to do anything, and then they attack you with your Reaper Chainsword. So instead of taking all the damage from that Reaper Chainsword, your invulnerable save that the Tech Priest can give to that Chimera makes it so that the Chimera can perhaps survive. So you could use your Chimera like that. Now, do note that this is badly placed, this Engine Seer. If it wants to support that Chimera, should probably be... Oh no. Come on. It's kind of slow because of all the little pictures I'm using. So that Engine Seer should be somewhere like there, so it can support the Chimera. Only issue is that if the Hellhound gets destroyed on the first turn, then it might Deadly Demise, it might destroy your Engine Seer, but Deadly Demise only triggers on a 6-up unless the enemy has a datasheet ability. And you still rolling a d6, so on average that Engine Seer is going to die, but there is a chance that it might not die, so it's not a guaranteed death, even if the Hellhound does get destroyed. And let's say they attack your Hellhound turn 1 because you deployed it right in the front of the deployment zone and they can just fire into that ruin and destroy it. It might end up really badly for you, but it might be okay because whatever's firing on that Hellhound next turn, that Baneblade is going to be able to fire back at it. So it's not the biggest deal if it does go down. 1/6 of the time it's going to explode, 5/6 of the time it's not. And even if it does explode, it's not like it's going to guarantee to destroy anything. So it's not bad deploying the Hellhound here. This is actually a very good idea. That way you can make it into the midboard and start scoring VP. So your Lehman Russ Exterminator does the little hull down barrel trick. With a regular move, it can move out here, stick its barrel out. And from this position, it can fire pretty much on the entirety of the top objective, entirety of the middle objective, and most of the bottom objective as well. So this is a great place for the Hellhound and Exterminator to be because they're in a place where they can support your other tanks onto all of the objectives and even into areas of the enemy deployment zone in a limited capacity. So this is a lot of tank stacking and combined firepower into certain areas of the board. If they enter that blue ruin, they are going to die. If they are behind in their deployment zone, behind the blue ruin, they are going to die. If they are pretty much like pasted right behind that blue ruin, they might even die if you move on your Chimera instead of using take aim, and you deploy your Kazarkin, and they're all doing damage, then you can even kill opponents right behind that blue ruin wall. Now, the enemy is going to want to stage behind this L-shaped ruin, and if your Taurox moves down here and then disembarks, since it's open and there's no physical ruin wall, if enemies are inside that ruin, then the Kazarkin can fire into that ruin, and so the enemy's really gonna have to screen you hard. They're gonna have to put scout units here, move them out, and that way they can protect an important unit that's inside that ruin. So you do have a lot of options. One place that you're not really covering too well is this top ruin here. If they do deploy behind that top ruin, it's totally fine. They can come out, attack the Chimera, and note that if they attack the Chimera from the right side, then the Baneblade can fire. If they destroy the Chimera, the Ogrins just pop out right behind the Chimera, put OC on the objective, and act as another screen so that you can have the Rogel Thorn firing, the Exterminator, and the Hellhound. So if this Chimera gets attacked, that's perfectly fine because most of your army can fire back. If this Taurox gets destroyed, that's perfectly fine. Next turn, you're going to have at least 3 tanks that are able to fire, maybe even 4, depending on where your Taurox is exactly and in which direction the enemy wants to attack it from. Do note that in this particular position, you are more than 1 inch away from the wall. So in order to fight the Taurox in melee, the enemy is going to have to come out. And once it comes out, now you can fire at the enemy. So there are certain ways that you can position. So see this Taurox down here? It is inside one of your firing lanes. Now the Chimera is not going to be here, but your Baneblade is going to be somewhat close to there. So if they attack from the top, the Baneblade can counterattack. If they attack from the right, the Baneblade can counterattack. Your Hellhound can counterattack. Your Rogel Dorn can just push through the wall and counterattack. And let's say they're attacking from the left side. If they're touching that ruin at all, if any of the units touching that ruin, that means it can get shot at. And if it can get shot at, now a lot of your army is able to next turn move and counterattack to attack the unit that just destroyed that Taurox. So this is a really good 75 point bait unit. Now do note that there are Khazarkin too that are worth a lot more. But the point of the Khazarkin inside the Taurox is that you get the first hit off. And you're hoping that you do so much damage off that first hit that you win the trading game, right? So your Khazar can get out, destroy something reasonably expensive. It gets completely destroyed. Maybe your Taurox gets destroyed. And then the enemies that just showed up to destroy those 2 units, now they get counterattacked. Anyway, this is the general concept of running a Hammer of the Emperor list for the Hammer and Anvil deployment on GW Terrain Layouts 1, 7, and 8. So I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys kind of learned how to mark up the map and visualize where the firing lanes are, where the super heavy can go, where the Rogel Dorns can go, and how to use scouts and transports to make a very big alpha strike in the beginning of the game. So if you like this video, if you learned from it, if you are excited about watching my other map studies, then please feel free to like, subscribe, and praise the machine god and praise the God Emperor of all mankind. Have a great day and good luck in your future battles with Hammer of the Emperor on the Hammer and Anvil deployment. To the God of all machines, to the God of all machines, his simply decides our supreme speed.